Since 2011, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of adolescents, teens, and young adults who struggle with anxiety and depression. The cause of this increase has been much debated, but one cause is becoming clear, and you're carrying it in your back pocket. We're going to tackle what technology is doing to your kids this week on the Weekly Disruption. Hey everyone, welcome to the Weekly Disruption Podcast, a weekly dose of biblical truth to cut through the cultural noise. I'm your host, Chris Hemmelman, pastor of First City. And as this is an episode on technology, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment and thank our tech guru, Renee White. Renee serves on staff here at First City, and she has been tirelessly working behind the scenes, recording and editing. She came up with our really great graphic and also found just the perfect intro music for this podcast. And so have to thank Renee for making this podcast happen. And here's a pro tip. If you want to start a podcast, find someone who's really good on the tech side, make your life a lot easier. So the church I pastor is largely made up of young families. And so one of the things that we did early this year was hold a 6-week parenting workshop where we equipped our parents with tools for the beautiful yet difficult work of parenting. And during one of the sessions, I did a talk on technology use, specifically screen time, smartphone use, and social media use. And this is such an important topic that I wanted to do a podcast episode as well, because I also have a burden that parents in our church, as well as anyone else who may be listening to this podcast who has kids, thinks well about how their kids are engaging technology. So what is technology doing to your kids? Well, as I mentioned in my opening, since 2011, the number of adolescents, teens, and young adults who say they struggle with anxiety and depression has markedly increased. And that increase really started to take off around 2014 or so. But the problem is much broader than just, strictly speaking, anxiety and depression. So among older Gen Zers, those who are in their mid to late 20s, this demographic is less likely to date, is less interested in things like marriage and having kids. They are more likely to live at home. When they were in their teens, they were less likely to have a job. And it was reported by managers and those employers that they were harder to work with in many ways. They were also, according to surveys, are much shyer and much more risk averse. And this has led to an overall sense of being less ambitious. So the picture that is being painted of Gen Zers and younger is one not only of significantly increased mental health issues like anxiety and depression, but also this overall picture of being less socially engaged, less ambitious, less willing to take risks in life. So the picture that is painted is one of a generation that is really struggling socially in many ways. Now, what is the cause? What happened to create a generation who struggles in these ways? Well, there are a number of explanations, and no doubt there are multiple causes to this. But one cause really is beginning to show itself. It really is becoming clear that this is a significant contribution to the overall problem. As prominent social psychologist Jonathan Haidt writes, there is now a great deal of evidence that social media is a substantial cause, not just a tiny correlate, of depression and anxiety, and therefore of behaviors related to depression and anxiety, including self-harm and suicide. So catch what he is saying, that social media, the technology of social media, is not complicating the problem. It's not even just contributing to the problem in a little way. It is a cause. It is a significant cause of the mental health struggles facing Gen Z. But even beyond this, smartphone and social media use have made kids less connected, less motivated, more risk averse, and more emotionally fragile. Writing in a recent article in The Atlantic, Haidt says this: once young people begin carrying the entire internet in their pockets, available to them day and night, it altered their daily experiences and developmental pathways across the board. Friendship, dating, sexuality, exercise, sleep, academics, politics, family dynamics, identity, all were affected. Life changed rapidly for younger children too, as they begin to get access to their parents' smartphones and later got their own iPads, laptops, and even smartphones during elementary school. And as a result, Haidt writes, Gen Z students found words, ideas, and ambiguous social encounters more threatening than had previous generations of students because we had fundamentally altered their psychological development. So with the advent of smartphones and social media in particular, a whole sort of rewiring was taking place of younger generations, of those who are Gen Z and younger. And essentially what Jonathan Haidt wants to argue is that this increase of emotional and mental health struggles, sort of the disconnect socially that has created young people who are more emotionally fragile and more risk averse and less connected is because of how technology has fundamentally altered childhood. He argues that childhood used to be based on the sense of play, of unsupervised and unstructured play, where you would go out with your friends and you didn't have parents watching you. And during that time, you often took risks. Sometimes you were doing things that maybe if your parents were there, they'd probably say, don't do that or be very careful. And so there was this sense of danger, so to speak, and you were kind of out testing your limits. And in that, you learned who you were and you learned to take risks, and that taking risks was good. And sometimes you would fail, but sometimes you would succeed. And so there was something about play-based childhood that actually helped our social and emotional development. Well, that has been switched out for what he calls more phone-based childhood. And so this is a childhood that is largely lived online in front of screens, and this affected social connection. So rather than connecting with your friends in person, you are connecting through apps and through social media and through chats. Rather than going out and taking risks, you were retreating into your room or into your home, and everything that you did, you were completely in control of. And so there was no actual risk taking and learning how to push your limits and how to fail and how to succeed. There was also this sense of addiction that took place by being on the screen and the ways that technology has addictive properties. There was also this exposure to images of life that many children would desire and long for, but could never achieve. And so there was the sense that there were things and there were people out there that were beyond my reach. And because I couldn't be like them, I couldn't have those things, I was less than. And that began to affect the emotional state of children as well. So a shift from play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood has significantly altered the social connection and the emotional health of an entire generation. So in another way to put this, that technology, the use of screens, the use of smartphones, and the use of social media has negatively impacted an entire generation. So you want to say, what is technology doing to your kids? It is making them more emotionally fragile. It is making them more risk averse, and it is making them less connected and less motivated. This is profoundly tragic, but not entirely surprising when you consider how we embrace technology as people. Technology is a beautiful thing. It is good. God has given us the capacity to develop technology to help us in our mission to subdue the earth, to be fruitful and to multiply and to cover the earth and develop and cultivate what God has given us. So technology is a good thing. We should be thankful for the innovations that we have experienced that have allowed us to transcend our human limitations in many ways. The advances in technology, the advances in communication, in travel, in medicine, so many good things that we have experienced because of technology. At the same time, because of our sin and because of our selfishness, because of our pride, we will use technology in ways that are harmful. And we will also use technology in ways that may not necessarily be sin, but might often be unwise. In the immortal words of Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park, we spend so much time asking if we can, we don't stop and ask if we should. And that's largely the problem that we see with these younger generations, is that there was this new technology available to us. There were smartphones, there were screens, there was social media, and in a lot of ways this was exciting and gave us opportunities to connect with people in new and unique ways. But we didn't stop and consider how this might adversely affect us, how it might form us in particular ways. And so what we're now seeing after over a decade of kind of this, the advent of screens and smartphones and social media, that the formation that is taking place is nothing short of damaging and dangerous, and has left an entire generation socially disconnected, less ambitious, and battling a number of mental health struggles and issues. And so as a pastor, my burden is that parents would be thoughtful, biblical, and wise about their personal technology use, yes, but the technology use of their kids. And so one of the things that I talked about in the session or parenting workshop is to be thinking about technology, not just in the matter of, is this sin or not? I mean, that's a good question to ask. But as Christians, we need to be asking a better question. Rather than just leaving it as, is this sin or not? Well, it's not sin, so it must be okay. We need to ask the question, is this wise? How is this forming us? That's what the question that I want to put to the parents of First City Church, but also to any other parent who may be watching this podcast episode. As you think about the technology that your kids are engaging, as you think about the culture of your home and how technology is used in your home, are you asking the question, is this wise? How is this shaping us? How is this shaping my kids? How is this shaping us as a family? Asking that question, asking those questions are important as you consider how you want your kids to engage technology. And parents, understand that if you're going to engage technology and teach your kids to engage technology thoughtfully, biblically, and wisely, it's going to be a fight. It is not going to be easy, but this is a fight worth fighting. In his book, Habits of the Household, Justin Whitmore Early frames this out really well. He sort of puts the stakes right in front of parents and encourages them to take up the fight. This is what he writes. The fight is not about, are screens okay? Or how much screen time is too much? The fight is whether you are forming your children or you are defaulting to letting screens form them. This is a fight for formation, and that is never easy, but it will always be worth a parent's time and energy, even if it's the last bit of time and energy you have. So parents, I want to encourage you to take up this fight because it really is a fight of formation. What is going to form your kids? You, as their parents, biblical wisdom, or the culture? Are you going to let screens and social media and whatever comes in through the smartphone form your kids? So for the rest of this episode, here's what I want to do. I want to encourage you in some biblical principles, some wise principles for thinking about technology use in your home. I don't just want to say, hey, here's a problem, go figure it out. I actually want to encourage you in a direction. Now, these are starting places. I'm not going to give you how to do every little detail of engaging technology with your kids, but I want to give you some principles that I think if you follow, if you let these begin to sort of help you shape the culture of your home, will make a world of difference in how you and your kids engage technology as you fight for the formation of your kids. And understand that principles are important here, not formulas. Like there are ways in which we seek formula, which is really detailed, structured plans that we just want laid out for us to make it easier for us. But principles are more important. Principles give you sort of a guiding rule, and then you have to lean into wisdom to see how those principles are going to play out. Because not every family is the same, not every child is the same, not every situation is the same. So I want to encourage you to consider what are sound, wise principles for engaging technology and not just look for easy one-size-fits-all formulas. You should do that with anything in your parenting. But when it comes to technology, I want to give you 3 wise principles that are going to help you set you on a trajectory for forming your kids well when it comes to this issue of technology. So first, let the culture of your home set the technology use. One of the things that we talked about in our parenting workshop is that as parents, your job is to set a culture in your home. That means that you are building the systems and the structures and the rhythms of your household around certain values. Now, you may explicitly know what those values are. You may state them in your home. You may state them with your kids, or you just may be operating with them sort of under the surface. You may be very thoughtful and intentional and purposeful, or you just may be defaulting to certain values. But make no mistake, there are some values that are shaping your home, whether you intend to or not. But I want to encourage you to be purposeful in the values that you have as a home in your home, and let those values shape the entirety of your home and the entirety of your household. And as you engage your kids, but then submit your technology use to those values. So one of the families in our church, when we were talking about this issue of having values that shape your technology use, they said, so two of the values that we have in our home is that we're readers and we're adventurers. So I love that there's a sense of, hey, in our home, we read. We love to read. We have a curiosity for knowledge, but we also love good literature and stories. So we're readers, but we're also adventurers, meaning we're going out into the world to experience new things, to take risks, to have experiences. And those two things shape the culture of the home in a number of ways, but also shape their technology use. So if you can imagine, hey, if we're readers, that's going to affect what kind of information they're taking in. It's going to affect how much time they're on screens, watching TV shows or movies. It's going to affect maybe even the type of content that they're looking at on their phones. But it's also going to affect how much time is spent on media. If you're going to go out and be an adventurer, you don't have a lot of time to just sit around in your home and watch screens all day. So there was a sense in which these values were shaping their technology use. And I love that the culture of their home was setting the priorities of how technology was going to be used. And this becomes particularly important because there are going to be moments where this is difficult. There are going to be days where, your kids are just being difficult and maybe you have some things you need to get done and they just keep bugging you. And so what are you going to want to do? You're going to give them a screen to sort of entertain them for a time, to kind of distract them so you can kind of focus on what you need to do. Or maybe you are just a tired mom or dad and you just need a break. And so, hey, if I can just set my kid in front of a screen and allow them to just sort of engage that. And so I can just have a moment of peace. Like those are moments that are understandable where you just want to use technology for the sake of convenience and the sake of escape. But you have to ask yourself, is that being driven by value or is that being driven by convenience? And so there's going to be those difficult times where you're going to want to run to technology in ways that aren't necessarily driven by your values. And so in those difficult moments, when there's temptation, what having values, proactive values, when you ask this question, who do we want to be? Who do we want to be as people? Who do we want to be as a family? You can make decisions in the tough moments, not based on convenience, not based on escape, but based on those values. Also, there's going to be times where your kids aren't going to understand why the technology use is what it is. The friends get to watch more videos and watch more movies. Their friends get a smartphone. There's going to be ways in which those outside your home may do things differently than you. And so in those difficult moments, rather than just telling your kids, well, no, technology is bad, and so we just don't do technology, or just say, kind of have these barriers, you can tell them, no, hey, here's the reason why we do what we do. This is who we are as a family. This is who we want to be. This is who I want you to be. So you can invite them into that process and show them, hey, this is what we're aimed at. This is not just a no because I said so, but this has purpose behind it. That's discipling your kids. That's raising your kids in a particular value and seeking to shape their minds and their hearts and their actions in something good. Because so often what happens when we hear about the negative aspects of technology, we run to the no. It's bad. And so we're just going to cut this off. We're just not going to do that. But that's not a proactive vision for life. Living with this sense of no, that's bad, don't do it, is one way to live. But that in and of itself is also shaping your kids. It's shaping them in the sense of if something's bad, just don't do it. And you sort of live from this place of the negative rather than saying, we want to live from the place of the positive. This is what we're about. And because we're about these things, it means that the way we engage technology is different. So let the cultural value, the culture of your home, the values of your home shape your technology use. Second principle, set boundaries on technology use that shape the culture. So this is kind of the same side, different side of the same coin. If you're going to first and foremost let the values of your home drive your technology use, now you're thinking through, well, what boundaries do we need to set in order to shape the culture? Because I think we would all agree, no matter who you are, no matter what you think about technology, that just sort of unfettered access to technology and screen times and smartphones and social media isn't healthy for anyone. This is just not a free-for-all. You have to be a really unhealthy person to think that a free-for-all is good. So the question becomes, where do you set the boundary? And why do you set that boundary? What is the purpose behind it? So for your family to say, hey, we're going to set these boundaries in order to reinforce these particular values because we want to be shaped in this way, again, becomes a positive vision for those boundaries. And recognizing that if we're going to be these kinds of people, we're going to have to make decisions about the limits of our technology use. So I hope one of the values of your family would be connection, personal connection. That we love to spend time together, that we talk, that we look each other in the face, we look at each other in the eye, that there's a sense of being around each other in person is a good thing that we want in our home and we seek to cultivate in our home. If that's the case, if that's a value that you have, how does that begin to shape your technology use? If you think about the importance of conversation and time spent together, how might that lead you to set some boundaries? So you could think of something like, how does that affect whether or not you allow phones at the dinner table? Or whether or not you have phones when you go out to eat? I mean, isn't one of the saddest things is if you're out to eat and you see a family sitting together and everyone, mom and dad and all the kids are just looking on their phone. I mean, they're sitting right across from each other in person, but they're more engaged. They're somewhere else. So if you value personal connection, how might that affect the boundaries in which you set for your technology use? Or think of perhaps one of the ways, the way that this play out is when you're in a car ride. I mean, how often is it just easy to give your kid a screen during a car ride just to sort of entertain them while you're traveling? But what if you were to say, well, no, personal connection is one of our values. And you think car rides are a great time to have a conversation and to connect with one another. So we don't use screens in our car. So again, I'm not saying that this has to be what you do. But if you really are driven by your values, if you really think of those moments that are formative, if you think about who we want to be and where are those spaces that we can live that out, then allow that to set boundaries for your technology use. Think of waking up and going to bed at night. Think of other spaces where technology could come in. But you want to think, well, if we're going to be this kind of people, we need to set these boundaries. And remember, there's no one size fits all for this. The important thing is living out these principles, not trying to find this neat and clean formula. And so be willing to be flexible, but also ask yourself, are the boundaries we set actually reinforcing the culture that we're hoping to build? So you could say, hey, these are our values, but the boundaries you set actually aren't helping you accomplish that formation and accomplish those values. So you have to be willing to reevaluate. You have to be willing to ask the question, hey, have we set this boundary too tight? But also, is this boundary too loose? So being able to reevaluate, being able to flex and to understand different seasons for different kids and different situations. So think principles, not formulas, but also ask that hard question. Are we actually building and cultivating the culture and the values that we want? Now, let me say one more thing about boundaries, though. As much as there is flexibility here and there's not a one size fits all, I think there is space to say there are some boundaries that based on the data that we are seeing should be no-brainers, should be no questions. Based on the most current data as far as the effect of smartphone and social media use on kids, it should be a no-brainer. Like wisdom should scream at you that you should not allow your son or daughter to have a smartphone with access to the internet and social media till they're at least in high school, and maybe even not until they're in upper high school like juniors and seniors. And even then, there should be a sense of limitation to how much access you give them. Like think of this, if your child had a food allergy, like a peanut allergy or allergic to something else, you wouldn't give them that food, right? Because you recognize if you were to give them that food, it would harm them, it would hurt them. Why would you give your child something that is going to harm them emotionally and socially? And to think, well, my kid is the exception, or we're going to be the exception. Friend, that would be foolish to think that, because the data shows, just based on the nature of the way that technology engages their mind, engages their heart, that to give them access to the smartphone, to the internet, to social media at too young of age is actually going to do great harm to them. Now, when your child gets older, as they get into their upper teen years and they are just a few years from leaving their house, you want to do a good job of helping them learn how to engage that technology in a healthy way. Again, the answer is not, no, we don't do that, that's bad. And then when they get outside your home, they have to go and kind of learn and figure that out for themselves. No, be a good parent. Parent them in that. Help them to develop a healthy relationship to technology, a healthy relationship to their smartphone, a healthy relationship to social media. And here's what that means. Your relationship has to be healthy as well. So many times the problems that kids experience is because their parents also have a problem. And so you have to start with yourself. You have to ask, how have you allowed your social media use, your smartphone use, your technology use, your screen time, perhaps go outside healthy boundaries? So start with yourself as you think about this. And if you have to make changes to to sort of the boundaries that exist in your home, start with yourself. Be willing to repent, be willing to change, and then be willing to have the humility to go to your kids and lead out yourself and model that for them as you seek to set healthy boundaries. Third and final principle here is curate content that is going to reinforce culture. So what I mean by this is it's not just the amount of time spent on social media or technology or screen times or smartphone, it's also what content is being engaged. What kind of material are you taking in or your kids taking in when they are on their screens? So I want to encourage you to curate a set sort of a number of maybe movies or shows or programs, whatever it may be, they are going to reinforce the culture and the values that you want. To try to find good movies and good TV shows and good programs that really speak to what is true and what is good and what is beautiful. Learn to shape your kids' tastes. Just like you would shape the taste for food. Like if you develop a taste for a certain type of food, it's hard to eat something that maybe is of less quality or isn't as healthy. And so if you can learn to shape your kids' tastes while they're young, so there's a sense in they only like what is good, what is true, what is beautiful. And then that's what has kind of captured their heart and they've been formed in. It's not to say that the things of the world aren't going to kind of try to lure them and there might not be an attraction there, but their ability to say no to that, to resist that, to even have a taste for it is going to be significantly higher because you have cultivated their taste. And so there's a sense in which you want the intake to be well curated in order to reinforce those values that are so important to shaping them as those who follow Christ. And so I want to encourage you, do the hard work. And I know this is hard because in a lot of ways, you can't trust a lot of program. You can't just sort of assume that this is going to be good because it says it's a kid program or it's a cartoon. An example of this is, so I saw a clip recently of a Transformers cartoon. Like I loved watching Transformers when I was a kid. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And so, Transformers was one of my favorite cartoons. And you would never think that a cartoon about alien robots that fight each other would be the place that certain propaganda would come through. But yet here, there was this episode where this Transformer, a robot, was talking about being non-binary. It's like putting the trans in Transformers or something like that. And so it's just really weird. Why would a robot, be talking about gender issues when it doesn't even make sense? It's a robot. It's not a man or a woman. But the writers of that cartoon decided to inject some propaganda as a way to try to speak to kids. And in a lot of ways, it's where you wouldn't expect it. So again, as a parent, this is a hard job. There's in a lot of ways, you don't know what you can trust, especially today. Now, there may be a sense of things that were created in past years, past generations, that stuff is just more trustworthy in some ways, but you've got to do the work. You've got to take the time to curate, to develop a sort of a list and a set number of movies and programs that you're like, these kind of are our go-to. These are the things that we like, we enjoy as a family, and cultivate sort of this kind of classic list. I mean, we do this with music, we do this playlists, we do this as people anyway, but if you were to do that, to say, hey, not just like, these are good, everything else is bad, but to say, hey, these are our favorite programs because, man, don't they just inspire us in what is true and what is good and what is beautiful? Aren't they good stories, good, well-crafted stories, good acting? Like it's quality. It's not just because the message is good, but it's actually quality art. Think about it at that level as well. You want to be engaging and curating those things that are good. So the 3 principles: 1, let the culture of your home set your technology use. 2, set boundaries that reinforce culture. And 3, curate the content that is also going to reinforce your culture. Again, principles, not formulas, things to try to help shape your engagement with technology and the engagement with your kids in technology in order to shape them, form them, and not allow the culture and not allow screens to form them. And again, I know this is going to be hard. It is going to be a fight. But parent, take up this fight. It is worth it. It is not the life of your child, the soul of your child, the health of your child worth this fight. Is it not worth more than your comfort and your convenience? Is not the life and the soul of your child worth the sacrifice and the time and willing to sort of lay down your life, your comfort, your convenience for their good? Again, I love how Justin Whitmell Early writes about this struggle, this battle in his book, The Habits of the Household. He writes this: "The cost is for us to bear. It's going to be hard, yes. One of the hardest things you do. They're going to want them all the time. And even more, you are going to want them all the time to make your afternoon or your car ride or your morning easier. But before you resign and say, this just won't work for me and our family, gently remind yourself of the sobering yet beautiful call of the parent. As Jesus took the pain so that we don't have to, so we take the pain so our children don't have to. The story of the gospel is not just our greatest hope in life and death. It is also the best paradigm for parenting. We don't sacrifice our kids' formation so that we can have an easier life. We sacrifice the ease of our life so our kids can have biblical formation. Fight the fight, parents. Sacrifice for your kids and give them biblical formation. So I hope this episode has been helpful, one, in just giving you an idea of what technology is doing to your kids, but also giving you some principles in which you can create and cultivate your home to engage technology thoughtfully, biblically, and wisely. Well, I love connecting with listeners. I love engaging. So if you have questions, you have comments, you have topic ideas, feel free to shoot us an email at disruption@firstcitybellevue. Also, would love for you to support the work we're doing on this podcast, so please hit that subscribe button on our YouTube page, our Apple iTunes page, as well as Spotify. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for another Weekly Disruption.